I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to the story. You know, over the last 9 years, Oregon has tinkered 3 times with the laws surrounding low-level drug possession. If you ask police, the first 2 really did not mess too much with the way that they enforce drug crimes. But that third one, Measure 110, oh yeah, they feel it's done a real number on the justice system and a bunch of communities. Portland State University researchers have been talking to them recently. They are partway through a 3-year study on Measure 110. Their first report is out now, and that is our big story tonight. The results probably were not going to surprise you, no matter what side of this issue that you're on. Most cops in Oregon feel like Measure 110 is a complete failure. But the researchers say, hold on, it's too soon to say that for sure. We'll show you the study results in a moment, but first some background. There are 3 researchers from PSU looking at the impacts of Measure 110. Their efforts being paid for by the U.S. Department of Justice. This is going to go on for 3 years. This first year is focused on talking with police from 10 agencies in 6 counties, half urban like Multnomah and half rural. I had a chance to talk with one of the PSU professors today. His name is Christopher Campbell. He said that officers don't think Measure 110 is working because, in part, people who have a problem with drugs are not getting help.
One of the major things that we found was that officers are skeptical of how decriminalization can motivate people to voluntarily seek treatment, which is manifested into officers being far less willing to hand out citations. For instance, one officer that we spoke to from an urban sheriff's office suggested that they believe Measure 110 took away the system's ability to help people recognize their rock bottom, so to speak, and kickstart a new life void of drug use. So this, along with many other reasons, leave officers feeling like giving out citations isn't really worth their time. This issue was really referenced by almost every interview, about 96% of our interviews. And it really bears out in the data when we look at arrests and citations.
Yeah, we've heard from people on the street. They think those citations are a joke. The researchers came away with 5 main themes from talking with police. Number 1, officers feel when they find someone with user amounts of drugs, Measure 110 now takes away their probable cause to search for other crimes related to drugs like burglary and ID theft. And because of that, they think they're not stopping as much crime. Also, it's harder to find informants who will help them get to the big drug dealers and distributors. Measure 110, police say, took away their bargaining power with street-level users. They can't threaten them with court punishments if they don't cooperate as informants. And those first 2 issues, police say, also led to this third issue, which is a drop in proactive policing. They also feel Measure 110 is all carrot and no stick. People found using drugs are not held accountable, and some officers are hesitant to issue Measure 110 citations. They think it's a waste of time. The researchers also found police frustrated that there's no way to stop people from committing drug-related crimes.
Many officers believe that without that traditional system of carrots, that is dropping charges, so to speak, in a drug court sense, and sticks, that is the use of jails, then there's no way to stop people from committing crimes related to drug use. So the concern now is, where do we get that point of contact of treatment? How do you get folks engaged with treatment, if not through the criminal justice system, which was drug court typically, or just using charges to hold over their head?
And by the way, what about that spike in drug-related deaths in Oregon? The study includes this graph that shows a climbing number of drug-related deaths beginning during COVID, but then really taking off after the passage of Measure 110. It looks like the numbers are kind of starting to fall a bit at the far right there.
But we wanted to couch the fact that, yes, Oregon, first of all, is experiencing a spike in drug-related deaths, and it is very critical, and it's very important that we focus on that as a social problem. However, we also have to couch that in the fact that the rest of the nation is also experiencing a very similar rise in drug-related deaths. So it's not just Oregon, and if it's not just Oregon, then it can't just be Measure 110, right? So there's a number of factors that could be going into this. And that's one of the reasons why we say it's too early to say, is because we just need a little bit more follow-up time from when Measure 110 occurred and then what happens after that.
And anytime we talk about Measure 110, you have lots to say on both sides. So here's your chance. What do you think of this new study? Are you surprised? Do you think decriminalizing is working or not? Send me an email or call and leave me a voicemail, will you? We love hearing your opinion. The email is thestory@kgw.com. The voicemail number is 503-226-5090. By the way, it doesn't matter if you're watching us live or later. I'd love to hear from you. Now, let's talk about our homeless crisis in Portland. Tomorrow, City Council is expected to vote on Mayor Ted Wheeler's proposed daytime camping ban from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. The proposal was met with protests and hours of public testimony when it was first introduced last week. Blair Best talked to a few city commissioners today and found that not all are on board.
Let's show that we matter!
Last Wednesday, signs of protest took center stage outside Portland City Hall, all in response to Mayor Ted Wheeler's proposed daytime camping ban.
When the activists come, it changes sort of the tenure and tone of chambers.
What we didn't see was the written testimony, more than half of which was for the ban. Now, Commissioner Renee Gonzalez is looking to make changes to the ordinance.
I think it's long overdue. Portlanders have been demanding some real changes on our streets, so I think it's a step in the right direction.
He wants to see stronger rules around tents near schools and non-city run shelters, as well as ways to break up large tent encampments.
So I think that's going to make it easier to clean up. That sort of eliminates some of the real opportunity for real criminal behavior to congregate.
Arguably, the most controversial piece of this proposed camping ban is the enforcement of it. If a homeless person is told to move their tent 3 times, they could face fines or jail time. Though some commissioners say the likelihood of that happening is slim.
Almost no one's going to jail over this. I think the reality of what we're trying to do is get tents off the streets, and so this authorizes police and others to enforce.
Some cities are looking at repurposing the jails to be treatment centers as well, because you kind of need some security when people go through that very difficult process of withdrawal.
Commissioner Dan Ryan plans to vote yes on the ban, even though there's a lack of shelter in the city.
We also have some people on the streets who say no to services. And so we need to get to the bottom of that. We need to provide services that they'll say yes to, and we need to stop enabling and just allowing people to do illegal things on the street.
Housing Commissioner Carmen Rubio wasn't available to talk with us on camera Tuesday, but says in a statement that she plans to vote no on the ban, adding council is committed to not criminalizing people solely for being homeless and believes this ordinance crosses that line. She also wants to see more shelter sites before enacting a ban. There will be a second reading on the proposed camping ban on Wednesday, and then there will be time for public testimony on any changes made to the ban. And then council is hoping to vote. If it passes, it'll go into effect next month. Blair Best, KGW News.
And there are still all kinds of questions surrounding the plan, including that enforcement aspect that Blair mentioned, and not just the jail part of the enforcement. Do Portland police have enough officers to give out those tickets, for example? Here's Blair with more.
So another important piece to all of this that I asked the commissioners about today is, do we realistically have enough police force to enforce a ban of this magnitude? We're talking more than 700 encampments across the city, and they're looking to give individual citations for each homeless person who doesn't want to move their tent. So the commissioner's short answer was no, they don't have enough police force. Yet they said more people are taking part in the police academy, and the Portland Police Bureau are hiring more staff. But as of right now, there's not enough police officers to enforce a ban of this magnitude.
All right, thanks, Blair, but I'm sure they'll be doing their best if it passes. So there's that. All right, what do you think about the camping ban proposal? Do you think it's the right step forward? Or does this feel all too familiar as far as the grandiose plan that looks good on paper, only to wither and fail and die after being talked about? You know the drill. Email thestory@kgw.com or call and leave us a voicemail.
Up next on The Story, part 2 of an investigative series called Saving Firefighters.
Hey, sir, I need you to get out of there, okay? I can't. No. There's all a fire around me.
We're looking at survival equipment on the front lines, and tonight's focus is on fire curtains to protect those in bulldozers and trucks.
Was there a point where you thought, I'm not getting out of this alive?
Oh, absolutely. I thought I was done for.
The technology has saved lives, but it's not installed in a single rig used by the Washington State Department of Natural Resources. Find out why when The Story returns.
Richard Wheeler, Andrew Zajac, and Tom Bashevsky, 3 firefighters who lost their lives in Washington's Twisp fire in 2015. Tonight, the investigators with our sister station in Seattle found there is a piece of equipment that could have saved their lives and many others, yet it's not used by hundreds on the front lines in Washington. In part 2 of her news series, Saving Firefighters, Susanna Frame brings us the story of a man who owes his life to a piece of gear that he says every firefighter should have.
This is what it looks like when you're inside a bulldozer, trapped by flames in a wildfire burnover, when a wall of fire scorches right over you.
911, your emergency.
I'm in a dozer on Buenaventura up by Lake Avenue. All the windows got blown out.
The dozer operator is desperate and dials 911 from inside his cab.
I can't last too long here.
Okay, sir, I need you to get out of there, okay?
I can't. No, it's all on fire around it.
The frantic call comes during the chaos of what's known as the car fire in Redding, California. It was 5 years ago, and the state of California had never seen anything like it. 170-mile-per-hour winds, creating a fire tornado.
I don't know how long it can last.
We're going to get someone out there as soon as possible if we can, okay?
Before hanging up, the firefighter asked the 911 operator to call his wife.
Can I give you my wife's phone number? Tell her I love her. Telescope?
This is that dozer operator today, Don Andrews, alongside his wife and grandkids. Don made it out of the burnover with barely a scratch on him.
Was there a point where you thought, I'm not getting out of this alive?
Oh, absolutely. I thought I was done for. When I had talked to the 911 operator,
2 firefighters working near Andrews didn't survive. This is a memorial for Fire Inspector Jeremy Stoke, who died in his truck. Don Smith died in his dozer. In that vicious firestorm, Andrews used a piece of safety equipment the others did not. What are called fire barrier curtains, made of multiple layers of aluminum that Velcro to your windows when you're trapped. The curtains can withstand 2,800 degrees, the same temperature as the very hottest wildfires. In this test in Australia, an engine equipped with curtains is pummeled by direct flames. You can see the burn scars on the outside, but inside, nothing is damaged.
What do you think about those fire curtains?
oh, it saved my life. I'm 100% sure.
This is just a sample of where wildland firefighters have died in their trucks, dozers, and excavators, including 3 young men working on the 2015 Twisp River fire here in central Washington. After their brush truck veered off the road, a wall of fire raced over their vehicle. They didn't have fire curtains to deploy.
It was really heartbreaking to have those 3 young men die at such an early age with a product that we've got that could have saved them.
And get that into place first.
Jim Roth of Los Angeles is the engineer who's created fire barrier curtains that have worked every single time they've been deployed. He started his research after a deadly Colorado wildfire in 1994. 14 firefighters died trying to use their fire shelters in a burnover, including a 29-year-old smoke jumper from Idaho, Roger Roth, Jim Roth's little brother.
I was very, very just angry, just really angry with how could he be taken away at such a young age.
The loss of Roth's brother led to the development of his curtains, saving the lives of about 24 firefighters.
Life's precious.
Don Andrews is one of them.
And we're good friends today. It's great to have new friends, right? But particularly friends like that have told me I thought I was going to die, and I got to go home and see my family.
Roth's curtains are installed on engines and dozers all over the world: California, Wisconsin, Texas, in Canada, Australia, and South Africa. But they're not required or commonly used in the state of Washington.
Do you think that the curtain should be mandatory?
Absolutely.
None of the rigs used by the State Department of Natural Resources has fire curtains installed. DNR wouldn't do an interview, but in a statement, officials said they could create a false sense of security and lead certain operators to proceed in unsafe conditions.
I think it's crazy. I think it's just ludicrous.
To a survivor like Don Andrews, battling a wildfire without curtains is an unnecessary gamble in an already treacherous profession.
It'd be ludicrous to ever even show up on a fire without curtains.
What are your people worth?
Yeah, what are they worth? How easy is it going to be to replace them? But it only takes once to make you a believer.
Wow, how about that? Come on, Washington DNR, are you kidding me? Susanna Frame reporting there. By the way, we have not forgotten an Oregon man died in 2018 as he used his tractor in Wasco County trying to protect his neighbor's property from an approaching fire. His body was found near the burned out tractor. We asked the Oregon Department of Forestry about rigs here. They told us some of their dozers have fire curtains, but not all. They added that none of their fire engines have them, but they train crews to keep water reserved on the engines during a fire in case of an emergency. So what do you think about the survival gear being used in Washington and Oregon? It seems like a quick fix to those fire curtains to get them on all the dozers and engines in both states and keep firefighters safe, but it's never that simple when the government's involved, I guess. Send us your thoughts. Email thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, the walkout in Salem drags along as the end of the session creeps ever closer. Democrats once again held a rally on the Capitol steps, urging Republicans to come back to work. How Senate Minority Leader Tim Knopp responded today, as well as my opinion on where things go from here when The Story returns.
Next at 6:30, shut down without state approval. Now the only birthing center in East Multnomah County has a reopening date. Details for parents-to-be. Plus, a month after Secretary of State Shamia Fagan stepped down, federal authorities have reportedly launched an investigation, what we know so far. And the best new restaurant in the nation, right here in the Rose City, along with two of America's top chefs, here from the winners. Straight ahead at 6:30. Hope to see you then.
Now to a bizarre medical story out of the state of Washington that we've been following for months. A Washington State woman from the Tacoma area refused to isolate herself or get treatment after testing positive for tuberculosis for more than a year. Tuberculosis, often called TB, is a bacterial infection that's spread through the air from person to person and it can be deadly without treatment. Last year, there were more than 8,000 cases reported in the United States. A few months ago, the Pierce County Health Department took a drastic step of asking a judge for a civil warrant to take the Tacoma woman into custody to force her into isolation, although they cannot force her to take the medication. It's a move they've used only a handful of times in the past 2 decades. 3 months after that civil warrant was issued, the woman was finally taken into custody last week and is inside a special room in the Pierce County Jail.
I think it's something where we always look to try to find alternatives that will help us avoid this, but in this case, it wasn't possible. Should be housed in a room specially equipped for isolation, testing and treatment to reduce the risk of transmission in the jail.
Isn't that bizarre? This case dates back to January of 2022 when a judge first ordered involuntary detention. Then in April, she was found in contempt of court and fell off the map. But investigators who were trailing her spotted her taking a city bus to a casino, all while positive for tuberculosis. Authorities went to her house last Thursday and took her into custody. She was then placed inside a specially equipped vehicle that allowed her to remain isolated for the trip to the jail. The woman's not being identified. Court records only show her initials of VN. This case is a civil matter, so she's not facing any criminal charges, meaning she won't be sentenced to anything. The civil warrant allows her to be held for up to 45 days, but it could be less depending on the treatment and testing. The health department says now she's in custody. They are, quote, hopeful that she will choose to get the life-saving treatment that she needs. Let's turn our attention to Salem now, where Democrats from the House and Senate gathered on the steps of the Capitol to, once again, urge their Republican colleagues in the Senate to return to work. We're going to see a lot more of this, I think. Tomorrow marks 5 weeks since the walkout began, by far the longest walkout in the history of the Oregon legislature. Last week, Senate Democrats voted to fine the absent Republicans $325 for each day they don't show up. You might ask why that amount? Well, $325 is the average daily pay for lawmakers. And a lot of folks were ticked off that the Republicans were getting paid that even as they boycotted. So I guess they have fixed that. Does it matter to those who walked out? No, not enough to get them to return, at least not yet. During their press conference on the Capitol steps today, Democrats say the walkout has held up nearly 300 bills in the Senate. That includes legislation that touches all kinds of topics: wildfires, education, guns, health care, you name it.
We're not giving up on this session. We are not giving up on Oregonians. We're not giving up on these bills that are so critically important. We're not giving up on the state budget, and we're not giving up on the Senate.
Okay, well, there is that. Today, the minority leader in the Senate, Tim Knopp of Bend, held his position when our team caught up with him.
So the Democrat leadership could end the walkout tomorrow by being trustworthy and bipartisan and constitutional and lawful. They choose not to do that. So I think that really tells you the value and how they value Oregonians.
Okay, so here's my opinion on all this. I've been covering the legislature off and on since I got here back in 1990. I have never seen a mess like this. And there's plenty of blame to go around. Are the Republicans in the wrong for boycotting the session and essentially holding budgets and important bills hostage? Yes, absolutely, you bet. None of this would be happening if they stayed and argued and made their points, which we do in a democracy, and stayed on the floor of the Senate. But oh no, they left. Today, Republican leader Tim Knopp issued a statement saying Democrats, quote, must end the theatrics so we can deliver bipartisan result for Oregonians. And that, my friends, is nearing on the laughable, considering the theatrics were instigated by the GOP walking out and denying a quorum in the very first place. But on the other hand, Democrats should be taking a hard look at themselves in the mirror. They have commanding majorities in the House and Senate, and the governor is a Democrat as well. Their refusal to budge at all on House Bill 2002, which allows girls under 14 to get an abortion without their parents' permission and requires insurance companies to pay for gender-affirming care, well, that is the other side of this walkout. Why won't they offer to send it to the voters as a referral? Let the voters decide. Why won't they offer to set up a judicial review system that some other states use for girls 14 and under who need an abortion without their parents' permission? I think one or both of those might be good enough for Republicans to return, although I have to say, I don't actually know. And who knows these days? And why did they bring up the House Bill 2002 with so much time left in the session and so much work left to be done on hundreds of bills and major budgets, all the major budgets? Well, they had to know it was going to be a controversial bill, and I doubt they assumed the Republicans would just stay and vote no as the bill was shoved down their throats. So why not wait and bring up HB 2002 after the major bills and major budgets had passed? That way, if there was a walkout, the damage would have been limited. Or did they bet that by putting the bill out in late April with so much left to do, that Republicans would not dare to boycott because it would mess up so many important things for Democrats and Republicans? Well, I guess we see how that one worked out. I really don't know how this ends. During past boycotts, we've seen it end when Democrats start to lose the votes on their side for their own bill, or the leaders decide to negotiate, but we're sure not seeing that right now on either side. And it won't surprise me if the session actually ends without Republicans returning. Yeah, I know they said they'd come back on the last day to pass budgets, whatever. I don't see Democrats going for that. It would be an admission that they've crumbled and that they've wasted all these weeks saying they would stand strong. So, in 19 days, if the session ends without a single new bill or budget being passed, what then? Well, a special session. And what would the first question be? Hey, where's that bill, HB 2002, or whatever number they give it then? Will that be part of the special session? And if the answer is yes, do the Republicans walk out again? And as more and more of the state's work does not get done, who pays for all of that? You and me, in more ways than one. Something to think about. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. Remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. Stick around now for the news at 6:30, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.